I am Olivia, 32 years old, an Army combat medic, and a single mother. A few weeks ago at my sister's extravagant wedding, she took the microphone and proudly announced to 200 guests, "My older sister is a single mom nobody wants." The entire ballroom erupted in laughter. Then my own mother's voice echoed through the speakers. "She is a used product." My dad covered his mouth to hide a smirk. Sitting right next to me, my 5-year-old son Leo squeezed my rough hand. His whole body was shaking. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with panic. "Mommy, why is everyone laughing at you?" I was about to pick him up and leave, but there was one man in that room who did not laugh. And his next action changed absolutely everything. Before I tell you the rest, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you really want to hear this story. What state are you watching this from? What time is it right now? Let me know in the comments. To understand why this nightmare happened, I will tell you from the beginning. The laughter tore through the room. 200 people, Armani suits, silk dresses, the elite of the East Coast sipping $100 champagne while tearing apart a single mother. I did not flinch. I did not lower my gaze. I locked my jaw until my teeth ached. My cheap heels dug into the thick plush carpet of the Carlisle. I could feel the stiff, scratchy tag of my $60 discount rack dress digging into the back of my neck. The suffocating smell of white lilies choked the air. It mixed with the sharp scent of expensive perfumes and the metallic clinking of silver forks against bone china. I scanned the ballroom. I did not see family. I saw hostiles. My eyes swept over the tables with the cold, dead precision of a medic assessing a combat zone. Aunt Clara sat at table 4. She turned her head away, suddenly fascinated by the crease in her white linen napkin. She had preached family values her whole life, but when the knives came out, she stared at the tablecloth. A coward. My father Arthur stood near a massive melting ice sculpture shaped like a swan. He tugged at the lapel of his tailored tuxedo, took half a step backward into the ambient shadow, and did what he always did. Absolutely nothing. He was the enabler. The man who paved the road for my mother's cruelty with his endless silence. He kept his hands perfectly clean while they threw me to the wolves, terrified of disturbing his own peace. Not a single person in that massive gilded room stepped forward. No one said, "That is enough." They just sipped their drinks and enjoyed the blood sport. A sharp, frantic tug on my right arm pulled my focus down. Leo. His small fingers felt like ice clamping around my wrist. I dropped my gaze, locking onto his 5-year-old face. His features were scrunched tight. Panic, confusion, the raw, unfiltered terror of a kid realizing the world just turned its teeth on him. His small chest heaved, gasping for air that felt too heavy to breathe in this toxic room. My heart hammered against my ribs, like a sledgehammer hitting a steel door, but my breathing stayed even. The military breaks you down to build you back up so that when the explosions start, you do not freeze. You do not cry. You secure the casualty. I pulled him hard against my hip. I brought my hands up and clamped them over his ears. My palms were rough, thick scarred skin from hauling heavy generator cables and tying off tourniquets in the dirt. They scratched against his soft, pale cheeks. "Do not look at them," I ordered. My voice was flat, dead level, stripped of any pitch or tremor. I killed the motherly panic instantly and replaced it with a sergeant's command. Emotion is a liability in a crossfire. "Look at me." Leo buried his face into the coarse gray fabric of my dress. I felt the sudden heat of his tears soaking through to my skin, burning me worse than a physical wound. The smell of his nervous sweat reached my nose, cutting right through the sickeningly sweet floral arrangements. I shifted my stance, planting my feet shoulder-width apart, squaring my body to the room. I became a human shield. Let them throw their verbal shrapnel at me. Let them laugh until their throats bled. They were not getting to my boy. I shifted my gaze back to the source of the fire, the heavy oak stage at the front of the ballroom. Chloe stood there, the bride, the golden child of the Poole family. She waved her hand dismissively, the diamonds on her thick Cartier bracelet catching the harsh glare of the chandelier. Her smile stretched so far it looked painful, warping her beautiful face into something hideous. She was feeding on this, inhaling the absolute power of crushing someone she viewed as beneath her. She looked at me, not as an older sister, but as an exterminated pest, a dirty smudge on her perfect $150,000 aesthetic. Beside the podium stood the architect of this nightmare, Evelyn, my own mother. She held a crystal glass of blood-red Cabernet. Her face stretched tight with Botox, and lifelong arrogance betrayed zero emotion. She took a slow sip, her cold eyes locked dead onto mine over the rim of the glass. She raised one perfectly plucked eyebrow. It was a challenge. This was not a slip of the tongue fueled by wedding nerves or too much champagne. It was not a bad joke. It was a calculated, synchronized strike. A public execution designed to erase my identity entirely. They wanted to remind me of my place. The worn-out, used-up dirt beneath their designer shoes. A warning to stay in the shadows where I belonged. I tightened my grip on Leo. My cheap pumps felt like heavy tactical boots right now. My mind clicked into gear, mapping the exit. 12 yards to the heavy oak double doors at the back of the hall. Past table 23, where they had hidden us in a blind spot. Past the swinging wooden doors where the kitchen staff hid from the yelling chefs. A tactical retreat. Save the civilian. Leave the burning building. I would not give them the satisfaction of a screaming match. I would not shed a single tear for them to drink up. I took a deep, steady breath, preparing to pivot on my heel and march out. Then a sound cut through the lingering, poisonous chuckles of the crowd. Screech! Metal chair legs ground hard against the polished hardwood floor right in the center aisle. It was a harsh, ugly noise, sharp enough to make heads snap around. Julian Vance stood up. The groom, the high-powered child advocacy lawyer from Manhattan. The man who was supposed to put a gold ring on Chloe's finger in less than an hour. He stood tall, his broad shoulders rigid under his custom dark suit. He did not say a single word, but his sheer presence sucked the oxygen right out of the room. The ballroom suddenly went dead quiet. The heavy, suffocating kind of quiet right before the atmospheric pressure drops and a hurricane hits. Chloe's nasty smile faltered. Her hand hovered uselessly in the air. Julian, she whispered into the microphone, her voice suddenly small and uncertain. He did not look at her. He did not look at Evelyn, whose wine glass froze halfway to her mouth, a drop of red spilling onto her fingers. He looked straight to the back of the room, past the 200 rich, silent guests in their tailored suits, straight at the cheap gray dress, straight at the calloused hands covering the ears of a trembling 5-year-old boy. Julian narrowed his eyes. It was a slow, analytical squint. I felt a sudden cold chill run up my spine, freezing the breath in my throat. I knew that look. It was not pity. It was an assessment, an indictment. It was the exact same way he stared at me 2 years ago on the very first night he ever set foot in the Greenwich house. The night this entire toxic, twisted game started to unravel. Julian's squint. It was an X-ray. It stripped away the crystal chandeliers and the Armani suits in that ballroom. It dragged me backward by the throat straight to a 4-bedroom colonial house in Greenwich. The exact place where I learned how to be a ghost. Greenwich is an old money zip code, manicured lawns, wrought iron gates, but inside our house, real estate was strictly divided by blood status. Chloe got the massive corner bedroom, French doors opening to a private rose garden, white silk curtains that caught the morning breeze. You could walk past her cracked door and smell expensive cedar wood and lavender. My room sat at the dead end of the second-floor hallway. It was not a bedroom. It was a converted storage closet sandwiched right next to the utility sink and the HVAC unit. Every time the furnace kicked on, the thin walls vibrated. The air smelled like industrial bleach and stale dust. There was no radiator, just a drafty window that rattled loose in the frame. When the winter snow melted off, the roof water seeped through the drywall, leaving a rusty brown stain shaped like a bruised lung right above my cot. I complained about the cold once. I was 14. My dad Arthur did not even lower his Wall Street Journal. It builds character, Olivia, he muttered. Learn to be independent. Message received. I learned to hug the shadows. I learned to walk down the hardwood stairs, stepping exactly on the edges of the planks so the boards would not creak. I learned to fold myself into small, tight spaces so I would not ruin their perfect family aesthetic. The financial divide was not a secret, it was a weapon. Documented by receipts. Senior prom. I walked into the kitchen after a 10-hour shift. Chloe was standing by the marble island, unzipping a heavy garment bag like she was revealing a holy relic, a pink heavy beaded Sherry Hill gown. The receipt from my mother's platinum Amex sat right there on the granite counter. $500. I set my plastic shopping bag on a kitchen stool. I pulled out my dress. Slate gray, stiff polyester blend. $63. I paid for it in cash. Crinkled $5 and $10 bills I earned working the graveyard shift at the local 7-Eleven. I spent my weekends smelling like stale coffee, burnt roller grill hot dogs, and chemical floor wax just to buy one dress for one night. Evelyn stopped wiping the counter. She pushed her wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her cold eyes swept over my cheap dress. A rapid surgical scan. "You do not suit silk anyway, Olivia," she said. Her voice was flat, zero malice, just a brutal statement of fact. "Your frame is too heavy. Your bones are thick. Your posture is stiff. That material suits you perfectly." Just like that, a $63 price tag slapped dead onto my self-worth. I did not argue. I folded the stiff gray fabric back into the plastic bag. A week later, I pushed my luck. I should have known better. Dinner time, roast beef, mashed potatoes, and dead silence. I reached into the front pocket of my denim jeans and pulled out the folded college tuition notice. State college, nothing fancy. Just a local campus to get a basic nursing degree. I slid the piece of paper across the polished mahogany table toward my father. Arthur kept his head down. He dug his fork into the meat. The serrated edge of his steak knife scraped hard against the porcelain plate. Scrape, scrape. He chewed his food slowly. He swallowed. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. He never even glanced at the paper. "We rerouted this year's budget," he said. I froze. What? Chloe landed that PR internship in Manhattan. He continued cutting another piece of meat. "She needs an apartment, a wardrobe, security deposits. We have to support her momentum." No apology, no alternative, no discussion about taking out a loan or working out a payment plan. Just a dry corporate statement. Across the table, Chloe did not even look up from her glowing iPhone screen. She just giggled at a text message stabbing a piece of potato. I sat there for 10 agonizing seconds. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. I reached out. I slid the tuition bill back across the wood. I folded it into neat, sharp quarters, pressing my thumbnail hard against the creases, and shoved it deep back into my pocket. The next morning, I skipped first period. I drove my beat-up, rattling Honda Civic straight to the strip mall downtown. I walked past the discount nail salon, past the vape shop, and pushed open the heavy glass door of the U.S. Army recruiting office. The air inside smelled like floor polish and stale black coffee. The recruiter, a heavy-set sergeant, slid a stack of paperwork across his metal desk. I picked up the black ballpoint pen. I did not hesitate. I signed my name on the dotted line, a 4-year active-duty commitment to the United States Army. I drove back to Greenwich. I grabbed my faded green canvas duffel bag. I threw in my cheap jeans, a few plain t-shirts, my heavy work boots. Nothing else, no pictures, no keepsakes. I walked down the stairs, the bag slung over my shoulder. Evelyn was standing in the foyer. She held a pair of steel gardening shears, trimming the stems off a fresh bouquet of white lilies. Snip, snip. She heard my boots thudding on the floor. She did not look up. She did not ask where I was going with a packed duffel bag. She just kept cutting the flowers. I grabbed the heavy brass doorknob. The metal felt freezing against my calloused palm. If you have ever been the invisible child in your own home, if you know exactly what it feels like to be completely replaced and ignored by the people who are supposed to love you, drop a 1 in the comments right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Let me know I am not speaking into an empty room. I turned the knob. I stepped out into the cold air and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. Click. I left the Greenwich house behind, completely convinced I was finally walking toward a real family. A family wearing combat boots and camouflage. I had absolutely no idea I was just stepping off a familiar battlefield straight into a hidden minefield. I wanted a family in uniform. I found Marcus instead. He was a logistics contractor, clean-shaven face, perfectly pressed khakis. He possessed a smooth, practiced voice that sounded like an oasis in the middle of a dry, exhausting military deployment. We had a small wedding at a cheap venue near the base. Nothing fancy. Just metal folding chairs, paper plates, and plastic cups. Arthur and Evelyn showed up. 2 hours maximum. They did not raise a glass to toast my marriage. They did not pull me into a hug. Instead, they spent the entire reception walking from table to table, cornering my squad mates to brag about Chloe. How she just landed a massive public relations job in Manhattan. How she was dating an Ivy League lawyer. Before leaving, Arthur pulled me aside near the exit. He reached into his tailored suit pocket and handed me a thin white envelope. $2,000 in cash. "Do not ask for more," he said. "Not congratulations. Not I love you. Not be happy. Just a cold, calculated business transaction closing out a bad investment." Marcus stood next to me as my parents walked out the door. He smiled his perfect smile. He took my hand and squeezed it. Hard. His knuckles turned white against my skin. It was not a comforting touch. It was possession. A physical warning to stay in line. I ignored the red flag. I wanted the illusion of a family too badly. Fast forward. I was 27 years old, 7 months pregnant. My army medical blouse stretched tight over my swollen belly, the heavy fabric digging into my skin. We ran a massive field training exercise that week. I spent 12 agonizing hours on my feet, sorting simulated casualties in the mud. Triage duty, tagging the wounded, smelling harsh iodine and stale sweat until my head pounded. My standard-issue combat boots felt like they were filled with wet concrete. My lower back screamed with sharp stabbing pain with every single step I took. I drove back to our off-base apartment, 3 in the morning. The engine of my rusted Honda Civic ticked loudly in the freezing driveway. I pushed the front door open. The apartment was completely dark. Quiet. I dropped my heavy keys on the kitchen counter and dragged my exhausted body into the bedroom. I collapsed onto the mattress without taking off my uniform. I turned my face into the pillows, desperate for sleep. My eyes snapped open. It was not the smell of our cheap laundry detergent. It was floral. Sickeningly sweet, cheap vanilla and heavy musk. A strange woman's perfume baked deep into the cotton sheets of my own bed. On the wooden nightstand, Marcus's phone lit up. A text message cut through the dark room, glowing brightly on the screen. "Cannot wait for tomorrow night. Room 402. I stared at the name on the screen, the regional director of his contracting firm. My chest caved in. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the drywall. The military drains the blind panic right out of you. I just stood up. My knees popped loudly in the quiet room. I walked out of the bedroom and left him sleeping in his filth. I sat on the cold ceramic tiles of the kitchen floor. The hard grout dug into my bare thighs. I pulled my knees tight to my chest. I grabbed my cell phone. My hands shook violently. A rare, stupid moment of weakness. I needed a mother. Just for 1 minute. I needed someone to tell me it would be okay. I dialed Evelyn. She picked up on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed. I told her everything. The sweet perfume. The glowing text message. The absolute betrayal. A long, heavy sigh came through the phone speaker. "I warned you, Olivia," Evelyn said. Her voice was pure ice. No shock, no anger at Marcus, just sheer contempt for me. "You are just too rough," she continued. "You do not know how to be soft. You do not know how to keep a successful man happy. Men need a gentle touch, Olivia, not a soldier in heavy boots. You brought this on yourself." I stopped breathing. The bitter cold from the kitchen floor seeped straight into my bones, freezing my blood. "Chloe would never let this kind of humiliation happen to her," Evelyn added. Click. The line went dead. The screen faded to black in my hand. I sat completely alone in the dark kitchen, betrayed by my husband in the bedroom, slaughtered by my own mother over the phone. A victim blamed for her own stabbing. Marcus packed his bags the very next morning. I did not say a single word to stop him. 2 months later, I gave birth to Leo. Just me and the delivery nurses in a sterile hospital room. We moved into a smaller, cramped apartment right outside the base limits. Peeling beige paint on the walls. A rusty radiator that hissed and clanked all night long. It was a brutal winter. I worked the night shift at the clinic to pay the bills. One evening, I came home from work. I dropped my heavy tactical boots onto the scuffed linoleum floor. I boiled water in a cheap metal pot. I sat at the chipped formica table, eating a 90-cent bowl of instant ramen. The cheap, salty broth burned my throat. In the corner of the small room, Leo slept soundly in his wooden crib. His small chest rose and fell in a steady, peaceful rhythm. I stared at him. The only piece of my bloodline that had not turned its back on me. The only pure thing I had left. I looked at my son, and I made a final choice. I took the shattered, bleeding pieces of my trust and built a solid titanium wall right around my heart. I locked the heavy gate. I threw away the key. From that winter night onward, the Poole family ceased to exist in my reality. They were crossed out, dead to me. I decided it would just be Leo and me against the cruel world forever. I was completely prepared to live the rest of my entire life behind that cold iron wall. I never expected a stranger from Manhattan to have the tools to break it down. 2 years before the wedding, the heavy iron gate of the Greenwich house opened for Julian Vance. Chloe dragged him home for a formal dinner, a trophy to display. He was a partner at a Manhattan law firm, but he did not handle corporate mergers or hedge funds. He was a child advocacy lawyer. He spent his days pulling kids out of broken, abusive homes. That night, the mahogany dining table groaned under the weight of expensive food. Maine lobster tails, soaked in garlic butter, chilled white wine. The Poole family put on their usual performance. Arthur played the wise patriarch. Evelyn played the gracious, flawless hostess. Chloe sat there glowing the absolute center of the universe. Julian barely spoke. I sat at the far end of the table, shoved into the corner near the swinging kitchen door. Leo sat on my lap. He was 3 years old at the time. I kept one arm locked tightly around his waist, my fingers constantly smoothing his hair, feeding him small bites of bread. My entire focus was keeping him absolutely silent. One dropped fork, one loud giggle, and Evelyn would unleash hell. While Chloe chattered about her new PR campaigns, Julian watched. He possessed the quiet, terrifying stillness of a man who makes a living dissecting lies. I watched his eyes scan the room. He noticed Arthur carefully cracking a lobster claw and placing the prime meat directly onto Chloe's plate. He noticed Evelyn cutting me off mid-sentence 3 separate times when I tried to ask Julian to pass the salt. He noticed me sitting tense, my shoulders raised, treating a simple family dinner like an active minefield. He saw the exact dynamic of the Poole family in less than 45 minutes. Dinner ended. We moved to the massive living room. Arthur poured scotch. Evelyn complained about the landscaping company. Chloe threw herself onto the plush white leather sofa, kicking her bare feet up and immediately scrolling through her phone. Leo stood behind me. He gripped the back of my jeans in his small fists, hiding his face against my leg. He knew he was not supposed to take up space here. For the entire evening, not a single person, not his grandfather, his grandmother, or his aunt had said one word to him. Not a, hello. Not a, how are you? Julian walked across the Persian rug. He stopped right in front of us. He did not hover over Leo like a giant. He dropped down. He took one knee on the hard hardwood floor, lowering his center of gravity so he was looking dead level into Leo's eyes. Leo flinched slightly, gripping my jeans harder. I like your shirt, buddy, Julian said. Leo looked down at his chest. He was wearing a faded, cheap cotton t-shirt with a cracked graphic of a dinosaur on it. That is a T-Rex, right? Julian asked, his voice low and completely serious. Does it bite? Leo's eyes went wide. He looked up at me for permission. I gave a tiny nod. Leo looked back at Julian and nodded his head slowly. A small, shy smile broke across his face. It was the absolute first time my son had ever smiled inside that cold house. I felt a sudden strange tightness in my chest. I pushed it down instantly. I did not have time for feelings. I had a job to do. I moved on pure blind reflex. The subservient conditioning drilled into me since childhood. I stepped away from Julian, and Leo grabbed a heavy silver tray and started stacking the dirty dessert plates and crystal wine glasses from the coffee table. I operated like a busboy, quick, invisible, keeping the peace by cleaning up everyone else's mess. Leave it. A hand clamped down hard on the rim of the silver tray. I froze. I looked up. Julian was standing next to me. His grip was firm. He was not asking. He was issuing a command. "That is not your job, Olivia," he said. The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice clinking in Arthur's scotch glass. Chloe stopped typing on her phone. Evelyn's Botoxed forehead actually managed to wrinkle as she shot a vicious glare across the room. Julian had just kicked the main pillar supporting the Poole family's toxic ecosystem. He disrupted the natural order. The golden child lounges, the scapegoat cleans. "It is fine," I muttered, trying to pull the tray away. "No, it is not," Julian replied, his voice calm but unyielding. He took the silver tray completely out of my hands and set it down hard on the glass coffee table. Clack. "Leave it." I stepped back, my heart pounding against my ribs. I grabbed Leo's hand. We left 15 minutes later, 9 o'clock at night. The winter air bit hard at my exposed neck as I carried Leo out to the sprawling driveway. The gravel crunched loudly under my heavy boots. Julian was leaning against the cold metal hood of his black sedan. A cigarette glowed orange between his fingers. As I approached my rusted Honda Civic, he dropped the cigarette onto the gravel and crushed it out with the heel of his expensive dress shoe. He crossed his arms over his chest. Thick white steam plumed from his mouth in the freezing air. "You are a good mother," he said. I stopped walking. My hand froze on the icy handle of the car door. He did not say it with pity. He did not say it like a compliment. He stated it like a proven, undeniable fact in a court of law. "That boy is completely safe when he is standing next to you," Julian added. The words hit me like a physical blow. They slammed right into the heavy titanium wall I'd built around my heart, cracking the metal right down the middle. My throat went completely dry. For 3 years, I had fought a brutal war to keep my son alive, and this stranger was the only person who ever bothered to tell me I was winning. I did not trust my voice to speak. I just gave him a single stiff nod. I opened the creaking car door, buckled Leo into his car seat, and drove away into the dark. I drove home feeling something dangerous. Hope. The foolish, naive idea that maybe, just maybe, the toxic spell of the Poole family could be broken. That maybe Chloe marrying a decent man would somehow bring a shred of humanity into our bloodline. I went to sleep that night actually believing things might get better. Then the sun came up. I walked out to the metal mailbox at the end of my apartment complex. I reached inside and pulled out a heavy, thick envelope, ivory cardstock, raised gold foil lettering, a wedding invitation. I tore it open. It was not a peace offering. It was a declaration of war. The hope Julian gave me in that freezing driveway lasted exactly 14 hours. I stood by the metal mailboxes holding the torn ivory envelope. Chloe and Julian. The Carlisle, Manhattan. $150,000. That was the number Aunt Clara had whispered over the phone a month ago. My parents, Arthur and Evelyn, were footing the entire bill. I stared at the gold foil lettering, and the roaring noise of a garbage truck backing up down the street faded away. My brain automatically pulled up an old bitter file. A thin white envelope handed to me near a cheap folding table. $2,000 in cash. Do not ask for more. I walked up the 2 flights of stairs to my cramped apartment. I tossed the extravagant invitation onto the chipped Formica kitchen counter. It landed dead center, right next to the red ink disconnection notice from the power company. The phone rang later that afternoon. I wiped grease off my hands with a rough paper towel and hit the green button. Olivia. No. Hello. No. How are you? Just my name spat out like a curse word. Chloe. Her voice was shrill, vibrating aggressively through the cheap phone speaker. Listen to me, she commanded. Wear a dull color, gray or brown. Do not try to draw attention to yourself. I want the photos perfect. I leaned my hip against the counter. In a dusty valley in the Middle East, I used to hold a radio receiver with literal blood on my hands, calling in Black Hawk medevac choppers while taking active enemy mortar fire. Now I was standing in a cheap kitchen listening to a 24-year-old PR girl issue tactical orders about dress codes so I would not ruin her aesthetic. And another thing, Chloe snapped, not waiting for a response. Do you absolutely have to bring Leo? He is going to ruin the ceremony. If you drag him along, you need to keep him completely silent. Do not let him run around. Do not let him make a single sound. I looked across the narrow living room. Leo was sitting on the faded rug, quietly clicking two plastic Lego blocks together. He was not a monster. He was a 5-year-old boy. Loud and clear, I said. I hit the red button. I did not argue. You do not argue with a dictator. You just dig your trench deeper and prepare for the incoming artillery. I walked over to the small kitchen table. I had bought a cheap glass vase from a discount department store to give as a wedding gift. I wrapped it in thin white tissue paper. I pulled a strip of clear packing tape off the roll. Rape! The harsh screaming sound of the adhesive tearing echoed loudly in the quiet kitchen. I taped the cardboard box shut, a meaningless tribute to a sister who despised me. The morning of the wedding, my phone vibrated against the scratched wooden nightstand. 7 a.m., one text message. Evelyn, table 23. You are near the kitchen service doors. Do not make a fuss. Absolutely no distractions today. I stared at the glowing screen. There it was. The final official classification. They did not view my son as a grandson. They did not view me as a daughter. We were a liability. We were a distraction to be hidden away in the blind spot of the ballroom so we would not pollute the East Coast elite optics. I did not reply. I deleted the text message. I locked the screen. I shut off the part of my brain that felt pain and switched entirely to mission mode. I walked to the back of my narrow closet. I pulled out the slate gray dress, the cheap one. The fabric felt rough and stiff against my fingers. No elegant folds, no silk lining. It was practically a uniform, perfect for blending into the shadows exactly as ordered. I pulled it over my head. I walked into the living room. Leo was standing there in his socks. I had bought him a little navy blue vest from Target, $14 on the clearance rack. The material smelled faintly of factory plastic and cardboard. I knelt on the cheap carpet, lowering my center of gravity so I was dead level with his eyes. I reached out my thick fingers, working the small plastic buttons of his vest. Listen to me, Leo, I said. My voice was steady. A sergeant briefing a private before a patrol outside the wire. Today is an observation mission. We are going to a very big room with a lot of people. We watch, but we stay quiet. Do you understand? His large dark eyes locked onto mine. He gave a firm single nod. He did not ask why. He already knew how the Poole family operated. He had learned the survival rules before he even learned how to tie his shoes. Good boy, I said. I grabbed my keys. We walked down the stairs and got into the rusted Honda. The engine sputtered, coughed, then finally caught. I put it in drive. We hit the I-95, merging into the heavy traffic heading straight for Manhattan. The drive was brutal. The heater in the Honda was broken, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of exhaust and old dust. I kept my hands locked at 10 and 2 on the cracked leather steering wheel. I watched the towering skyline of the city grow larger through the dirty windshield. We were driving toward a $150,000 party. But I knew exactly what it really was. I parked 3 blocks away to avoid the ridiculous valet fees. The November wind whipped down the concrete canyons of the city, biting through my thin gray coat. I grabbed Leo's hand. His small fingers squeezed mine tightly. We walked up the block. The massive towering structure of the Carlisle Hotel loomed ahead. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in heavy fur coats funneled through the grand entrance. I did not slow down. I kept my spine ramrod straight. I pushed my hand against the heavy brass bar of the revolving glass door, pulling my son with me, stepping straight into the minefield. The Carlisle's grand ballroom smelled like money. Pure, unadulterated East Coast wealth. Thousands of white roses suffocated the air, heavy and sweet. A string quartet played classical music near the center of the room, the notes floating over the low, polite chatter of 200 guests. But I was not sitting in the center. I was at table 23, the absolute dead zone. a blind spot intentionally chosen by Evelyn to hide the ugly gray stain on her perfect canvas. We were sitting 3 feet away from the heavy wooden swinging doors of the kitchen. Every 40 seconds, a waiter kicked the door open. Bam! The classical music was instantly drowned out by the chaotic roar of the kitchen. Yelling chefs, the harsh clanking of stainless steel pots, the thick, heavy smell of garlic butter and charred beef roasting on an open flame. Leo sat next to me. He looked tiny on the massive, oversized velvet chair. His little legs dangled, swinging back and forth over the thick carpet. He was holding a small toy car, his knuckles turning white as he gripped it, terrified to make a single sound. He was 5 years old, but he sat there with the rigid discipline of a soldier stuck in a trench. Chloe made her rounds, the bride on her victory lap. Her custom Vera Wang gown dragged heavily across the carpet, sweeping up the fallen white rose petals. People stood up, offering loud congratulations and clinking their champagne glasses as she passed. She soaked it in. Then she walked past table 23. She did not stop to say hello. She did not even break her stride. She just slowed down for half a second. Her eyes flicked over my cheap gray dress, then snapped down to Leo. She narrowed her eyes, a look sharp enough to draw blood. She raised her right hand, pointing her index finger dead straight at my 5-year-old son, and pressed it hard against her painted lips. Shh. A silent, vicious warning. Keep him quiet, or else. I did not flinch. I crossed my legs, squared my shoulders, and stared a hole right through her until she turned her back and kept walking. 30 minutes later, the main event started. Family photos. A loud voice echoed over the PA system. The hired photographer stood near the massive 5-tier wedding cake, waving his hand. Immediate family only to the front, please, pools and vances. I stood up. I smoothed the rough, stiff fabric of my discount rack dress. I reached down and took Leo's hand. His palm was slightly sweaty. Come on, I said quietly. We took exactly 5 steps away from table 23. Evelyn cut through the crowd like a shark. She intercepted me before I even made it halfway to the dance floor. She stepped directly into my path, completely blocking my way to the cake. She wore a rigid plastic smile, the kind of Botox frozen grin she used for society parties, but her eyes were completely dead. "Where are you going?" she hissed. She kept her voice low, dropping the volume so the nearby guests holding their champagne flutes would not hear the venom. "To the photo," I said, keeping my voice flat. Evelyn took half a step closer. The overwhelming smell of her expensive Chanel perfume hit me, mixing sickeningly with the garlic butter from the kitchen. I said, "Immediate family only, Olivia." She muttered through gritted teeth, "We are doing the small, tight group first." I stopped. My boots locked onto the carpet. "I am her sister," I said. It was a statement of biological fact. Evelyn's fake smile twitched. "I told you to step back." She did not even look down at Leo. She did not acknowledge her own flesh and blood standing right there. She looked at me like I was a stray dog trying to walk onto a red carpet. A dirty secret she was desperate to sweep back under the rug. She was actively publicly erasing my identity in front of 200 people. A sharp tug on my hand broke my stare. "Mommy!" Leo looked up at me. His large brown eyes were wide with total confusion. He pointed his small finger toward the cake where Chloe, Arthur, and Julian's family were already gathering and laughing. "Why aren't we taking a picture?" he asked. His voice was small, but it cut through the noise of the ballroom like a knife. I felt a massive, jagged lump form in my throat. It tasted like ash and swallowed anger. The kind of raw, bitter anger that makes your hands shake and your vision go dark. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Evelyn by her silk shoulders and shake her until that fake smile cracked wide open. But I looked down at my son. If I screamed, I was the crazy one. If I fought back, I was the jealous, bitter single mother ruining the beautiful day. That was their game. They wanted me to break. I did not break. I swallowed the jagged lump. I bent my knees and scooped Leo up into my arms. He wrapped his small arms tight around my neck, bearing his face into my shoulder. "It is okay, buddy," I whispered into his hair. My voice was rock steady. "We do not need their picture." I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. I switched the camera, held my arm out, and snapped a quick, slightly blurry selfie of just the two of us standing near the kitchen doors. If your family has ever treated you like a dirty secret, if you know exactly what it feels like to be pushed out of the frame while they pretend to be perfect, drop a me in the comments right now. Hit like and subscribe. Let me know I am not the only one who has taken a selfie alone in a crowded room. Over Evelyn's shoulder across the room, I noticed movement. Mike, Julian's cousin. He was standing near the edge of the stage, adjusting the angle of his cell phone on a metal tripod. He tapped the screen. The red recording light blinked on. He was live streaming the wedding to the West Coast family. A sharp metallic noise rang out. Clink, clink, clink. Someone was tapping a silver fork against a crystal champagne flute. The signal for the speeches. The low chatter in the massive ballroom instantly died down. Evelyn shot me one last triumphant smirk, turned on her heel, and walked away toward the microphone. Julian's leather dress shoes hit the heavy oak stage with a dull, rhythmic thud. 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 He did not walk like a groom about to give a toast. He marched like a man walking up to a witness stand to deliver a death sentence. The low murmur of 200 rich guests died out instantly. The air in the ballroom went completely stale. Chloe, standing at the center of the stage in her massive Vera Wang gown, noticed him first. Her vicious, mocking smile shifted into a picture-perfect bridal beam. She reached out both of her arms, expecting him to pull her in for a kiss for the photographers. Julian did not even look at her. He stepped right past her outstretched arms. His large hand shot out and clamped down on the microphone stand. He ripped the microphone out of the metal clip. Screech! A massive, high-pitched wave of electronic feedback blasted through the giant speakers. Guests in the front row flinched, covering their ears. Evelyn jumped. Her hand jerked hard, knocking her crystal glass of Cabernet over. The dark red wine spilled out, bleeding rapidly across the pristine white linen tablecloth like a fresh wound. She stared at the spreading stain, her Botox-frozen face suddenly looking old and panicked. Arthur, standing 3 feet away, just froze. A statue in a rented tuxedo. Julian stepped dead center of the stage. He gripped the microphone. He looked out over the sea of Armani suits and diamond necklaces. "I am a child advocacy lawyer," Julian said. His voice was a low, heavy baritone. It did not echo. It hit the walls of the Carlisle like a wrecking ball. "My entire career," he continued, "is built on pulling innocent kids out of toxic, abusive environments. I spend my days sitting in courtrooms looking at adults who use children as punching bags." He paused. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. "And tonight," Julian's voice grew harder, the edge of it sharp enough to cut glass. "I just watched a family use a 5-year-old boy and his mother as cheap entertainment." A collective jagged gasp ripped through the room. Chloe's jaw dropped. The bridal glow vanished, replaced by sheer panic. She lunged forward, her manicured fingers digging hard into the sleeve of Julian's custom suit jacket. "Julian, stop," she hissed into his shoulder. "You are embarrassing me." Julian did not flinch. He did not lower his voice. He looked down at her hand, gripping his arm. "No," he said, speaking directly into the microphone. "You embarrassed yourself." He yanked his arm back violently. Chloe stumbled, her heavy dress tripping her up, nearly falling against the podium. Julian turned his body. He locked his eyes dead onto Evelyn. He raised his right hand and pointed a single steady finger right at her face. Evelyn shrank back. For the first time in 32 years, I saw my mother look genuinely terrified. "You," Julian aimed his voice like a sniper rifle. "You stood up here and called your own daughter a used product. You took a microphone and actively encouraged 200 people to laugh at your own 5-year-old grandson." Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, to deflect, to gaslight, to spin it like she always did. Nothing came out. Her throat worked uselessly. Julian turned his back on her. He faced Chloe again. He reached up to the lapel of his suit jacket. His fingers gripped the delicate white rose boutonniere pinned over his chest. He ripped it off the fabric. He tossed it casually. It hit the hardwood stage floor near Chloe's feet. "I spend my life protecting kids from abusers," Julian said. The absolute disgust in his voice was thick enough to choke on. I am not going to marry one. 200 people stopped breathing at the exact same time. The silence was deafening. No one moved. No one coughed. The absolute destruction of the Poole family's carefully curated $150,000 illusion was happening in real time. Julian took half a step back. He looked out at the stunned crowd, then raised his hand and pointed toward the far left corner of the ballroom. And just so we are completely clear, Julian announced, his voice ringing through the massive room. My cousin Mike is standing right over there. Every single head in the room snapped toward the corner. Mike was standing next to his metal tripod. The red recording light on his cell phone was glowing brightly in the dim room. Mike has been live streaming this entire reception, Julian said, delivering the final fatal blow. There are 50 members of my extended family watching right now from the West Coast. They just saw exactly what kind of sick, twisted family I almost married into. Evelyn let out a small strangled noise, a pathetic squeak from a woman who just realized her worst nightmare had come true. The polished elite image she had spent decades building was dead, slaughtered on live video for a bunch of California lawyers and judges to see. Julian did not look at her again. He did not look at Chloe, who was now openly sobbing on the stage, her makeup running down her face. He placed the microphone gently onto the wooden podium. The bar is still open, Julian said to the crowd. He turned around, walked down the wooden steps, and headed straight for the exit doors. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom slammed shut behind Julian. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Then, total chaos. The Carlisle ballroom exploded. 200 people started talking, shouting, and moving all at once. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Chairs scraped aggressively against the hardwood floor. Up on the stage, Chloe dropped to her knees, burying her face in her expensive Vera Wang skirt, sobbing hysterically. She raised one hand, pointing a trembling, accusing finger straight across the room at me. Evelyn did not run after Julian. She did not try to save the wedding or comfort her crying golden child. The true nature of a narcissist kicked in instantly. The world was on fire, and she needed someone to burn. She grabbed handfuls of her silk dress to keep from tripping. She stomped down the stage steps. The sharp stiletto heels of her designer shoes slammed hard against the floor. Click, click, click. She marched straight toward table 23 like a heat-seeking missile. Her face was a mask of pure, ugly rage. The Botox could not hide the violent twitch in her jaw. "What did you say to him?" she shrieked, ignoring the stares of the wealthy guests parting out of her way. She stopped 2 feet from me, her chest heaving. "You are just jealous. You could not hold on to your own garbage husband, so you poisoned Julian against your sister. You ruined this day." I looked at her, really looked at her. I did not raise my voice. I did not try to explain myself. Basic combat training drills it into your head you do not waste ammunition shooting at ghosts. Arguing with Evelyn was fighting a ghost. She did not want the truth. She wanted a scapegoat to carry the crushing weight of her own public humiliation. I was done carrying it. I reached down and scooped Leo up. I lifted him high, settling his weight onto my hip. His small arms wrapped a death grip around my neck. He buried his face deep into the collar of my cheap gray dress. I felt the hot, wet dampness of his tears soaking straight through the rough fabric to my collarbone. I tightened my arm around his back. I stood up perfectly straight. I locked eyes with Evelyn. "Julian has eyes," I said. My voice was dead flat. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, hard sheet of ice. He made his own decision based on the disgusting freak show you and Chloe just put on for an audience. I continued. I leaned in just an inch closer. "Do not drag your garbage over to my yard." Evelyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked as if I had just slapped her across the face with a brick. The obedient, silent punching bag she had abused for 32 years had just snapped the chain. I did not wait for her brain to reboot. I turned my back on her. It was exactly 12 yards from table 23 to the main exit doors. A short walk, but it felt like a tactical march out of a war zone. I stepped onto the center aisle, the same aisle Chloe was supposed to walk down. The crowd of guests, the same people who had laughed at my son just 10 minutes ago, were blocking the way. Men in tuxedos, women clutching their expensive purses. They looked at my face. They looked at the heavy combat boots under my cheap dress. They parted. They stepped aside like the Red Sea, pressing themselves against the tables to give me a wide berth. No one said a word. No one dared to make eye contact. The sheer suffocating weight of the truth Julian had dropped on them was still heavy in the air. I kept my spine rigid, shoulders squared, chin parallel to the floor. Every single step I took toward those exit doors was a surgical cut severing the infected, rotting bloodline of the Poole family once and for all. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The cold, sterile air of the hotel lobby hit my face. I walked toward the revolving glass doors leading out to the street. A tall figure stepped out from the shadows near the coat check. Julian. He was holding his dark wool overcoat draped over his arm. He looked tired, but his shoulders were relaxed. The tight, coiled tension he had carried in the ballroom was completely gone. He stopped a few feet away from me. He looked at Leo still hiding his face in my neck and then looked at me. "I am sorry I did not say something sooner," Julian said. His voice was quiet, genuine. I stopped walking. I shook my head once. "Do not apologize," I said. "You just saved my kid from growing up thinking his mother is a piece of trash. You did your job." Julian reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a thick, textured business card. He stepped forward and slid it firmly into my free hand. "Call me," he said. He looked dead serious. "Pro bono, whatever you need to keep them away from him." I looked down at the card. Julian Vance, Senior Partner, Child Advocacy. I nodded. I pocketed the card, tightened my grip on Leo, and pushed through the revolving glass doors out into the freezing Manhattan night. I strapped Leo into the rusted Honda. I turned the heater on high to warm his shaking body. We drove in total silence all the way back to the cheap apartment complex. I thought the war was finally over. I thought the worst of the poison had been drained. I parked the car. I carried Leo upstairs and laid him down in his bed. I walked into the kitchen and pulled my cell phone out of my coat pocket. The screen was lit up. I had 47 missed calls, all from Arthur and Evelyn. I ignored them, but right below the missed calls was a single text message from Sarah, a former army buddy of mine who worked part-time catering for the event company that handled the wedding. "Olivia, I am so sorry. You need to see this." Attached to the message was a file containing 17 screenshots. I clicked the file. It was a massive group text thread. The title of the chat read, "The Poole Family, No, Olivia." I sat alone in the dark kitchen staring at the glowing screen. "The Poole Family, No, Olivia." The title of the group chat burned into my eyes in the harsh, cold blue light of my cell phone. Sarah had snuck a photo of Chloe's unlocked phone while the bridesmaids were getting ready in the hotel suite earlier that afternoon. I tapped the first screenshot. The text bubbled up in sharp green and blue boxes. "Chloe, I swear to God, if she wears some awful outfit to my wedding, I'm going to roast her on the mic. Evelyn. Make it funny, honey. The guests will love it. A little family roasting always loosens up the crowd. Call her out? Chloe? I am going to call her a used-up leftover. Let everyone know exactly why her husband dumped her. Evelyn perfect. Just make sure you do it after the cake cutting. We want the photographers to get the good shots first." I swiped to the next image. Arthur. Just do not mention me. Keep my name out of the joke. I stopped swiping. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. They did not slip up. It was not the champagne talking. It was not a bad joke that went too far. It was a fully scripted, premeditated public execution. My own mother greenlit the attack. My own sister wrote the punchlines. And my father, the quiet passive enabler who always pretended to keep his hands clean, knew exactly what was coming and just asked them not to get blood on his shoes. I set the phone down on the cheap Formica table. I did not cry. There was no sadness left in my body, just a cold, absolute clarity. I looked through the open doorway into the living room. Leo was fast asleep on the worn-out sofa, his small arms wrapped tightly around a stuffed bear. I picked up the phone. I opened my contacts. Evelyn Poole. Block this caller. Arthur Poole. block this caller. Chloe Poole, block this caller. I went to Facebook, blocked, Instagram, blocked. I did not type out a long emotional paragraph explaining how much they hurt me. I did not demand an apology. Narcissists feed on your pain. If you scream, they know they still have power over you. I gave them nothing. Absolute radio silence. A total blackout. Complete erasure from my universe. 3 days passed. The silence in the apartment was beautiful. Then on Thursday afternoon, the war came to my front door. Bang, bang, bang. The heavy, aggressive pounding rattled the cheap wood of my apartment door. The hinges shook. Olivia, open this door right now. Evelyn. Her voice was shrill, echoing loudly in the narrow, dingy hallway of the complex. I was washing dishes. I slowly dried my hands on a dish towel. I looked at Leo, who was sitting on the floor playing with his blocks. He froze his eyes wide with fear. Go to my bedroom, Leo, I said quietly. Shut the door. Do not come out until I say so. He scrambled up, ran down the short hall, and shut the bedroom door with a soft click. I walked over to the front door. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open exactly 4 inches. I kept my heavy combat boot wedged firmly behind the base of the door. Evelyn stood in the hallway wearing a beige cashmere coat. Her face was flushed dark red with fury. Arthur stood 2 steps behind her, wearing a golf polo. His arms crossed tightly over his chest. He looked at the peeling paint on the hallway wall, avoiding my eyes completely. You blocked my number. Evelyn practically spit the words through the 4-inch crack. Who do you think you are? I did not answer. I just stared at her. Do you have any idea what you caused? She yelled, stepping closer. Julian canceled the entire thing. The Carlyle kept the deposit. The catering company refused to refund the food. Over $100,000 down the drain, you are going to take out a loan and pay for half of it. I did not ruin the wedding, I said. My voice was a dead flat line. Evelyn sneered, her Botox-tightened face contorting. You poisoned him. You played the pathetic victim. Julian canceled the wedding. I cut her off because he watched you call your own daughter a used product in front of a 5-year-old kid. It was a joke. Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking. It was just a harmless joke, you oversensitive brat. I reached into the back pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'd printed out the screenshot of the text thread at the local library. I shoved the paper through the crack in the door, holding it directly in front of Evelyn's face. I saw the group chat, Evelyn, I said. She stopped yelling, her eyes locked onto the printed text messages, the green and blue bubbles, her own words staring right back at her. The color drained completely out of her face, leaving her looking old and hollow. Arthur finally looked over her shoulder. He saw his own text message printed at the bottom of the page. He swallowed hard and took a step backward. You are not a family, I said, looking right into Evelyn's eyes. You are an abusive cult, and your membership is permanently revoked. Evelyn's panic quickly turned back into vicious rage. She shoved her manicured hands against the door, trying to force it open. Do not you dare talk to me like that, she hissed. I want to see my grandson. Let me in. I planted my boot. I braced my shoulder against the heavy wood. I pushed back with the solid, calloused strength of a woman who spent 4 years hauling ammunition crates and wounded soldiers. Evelyn stumbled backward, losing her balance in her expensive heels. He is my son, I said, and I decide who breathes his air. I slammed the heavy door shut. I reached up and threw the deadbolt. Click. I slid the chain lock into the metal groove. Clack. I turned the bottom security knob. Thud. 8 months passed. The heavy brass deadbolts on my apartment door stayed locked tight. The cold winter turned into a hot, suffocating summer and then faded into a crisp autumn. Inside my walls, it was perfectly quiet. But the shockwave from the ballroom at the Carlyle Hotel continued to ripple outward, systematically leveling the Greenwich house. Mike's live stream recording did exactly what it was intended to do. It exposed the rot to the sunlight. Julian did not just walk away from the altar. He filed a formal restraining order against Chloe the very next morning. His mother, a retired and highly respected state judge, sent a cease and desist letter by certified mail to Arthur and Evelyn. It threatened massive legal destruction if they ever tried to contact the Vance family again. Chloe's Manhattan public relations firm placed her on indefinite administrative leave. They cited a breach of corporate ethics. In reality, they simply did not want a viral abusive bridezilla tanking their high-end client optics. She lost the job. She lost the apartment. Evelyn suffered the absolute worst fate a narcissist could possibly face: public humiliation. She was forced to step down as president of the local women's society. She stopped showing up at the country club dining room. She could not handle the cold stares, the pointed fingers, and the quiet, vicious whispers from the wealthy women she used to look down on. Her fake, gold-plated empire collapsed into dust. Arthur sent me an email in late January. Just 3 words sitting in my inbox. "I'm sorry." I sat at my kitchen table. I stared at the glowing screen. I did not type out a reply. I did not feel a single drop of pity or obligation. I placed my hand on the computer mouse, dragged his email directly into the digital trash bin, and emptied the folder. Click. Erased. I stood in front of the cheap, cracked mirror in my bedroom. I buttoned my crisp green uniform shirt. I reached into a small plastic container, pulled out a heavy metal pin, and pushed the sharp needles through the collar. Staff Sergeant, I earned the promotion in blood and sweat. The command moved me off the brutal night shifts at the triage clinic. I was assigned to a combat medic training group, shouting orders, running drills, building the next rotation of soldiers. My heavy boots hit the pavement with a completely different kind of weight now. I started going to the local Veterans Affairs hospital on Tuesday afternoons. Dr. Hayes sat across from me in a quiet room with humming fluorescent lights. He did not judge. He helped me dig the deeply buried scapegoat programming right out of my brain. He taught me how to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. That clinic was also where I met David. He worked in the physical therapy wing, helping shattered veterans learn how to walk again. He did not wear Armani suits. He did not have a slick corporate smile like Marcus. He wore faded flannel shirts, and he kept his hands dirty fixing busted wheelchairs. But he knew how to repair broken things. More importantly, he knew how to sit perfectly still and just listen. A bright, warm Saturday morning. I stood in my kitchen. The rich smell of dark roast coffee filled the small room. The harsh winter was gone, and thick yellow sunlight poured through the cheap plastic window blinds, heating up the linoleum floor. Leo was sitting at the chipped formica table. He was 6 years old now, taller, stronger. He was bent over a large piece of thick white construction paper, gripping a blue wax crayon in his small fist. The rough paper scratched loudly as he colored. Scribble, scribble, scribble. It was a weekend art project for his new elementary school. The family tree. I leaned my hip against the counter and took a slow sip of my black coffee. I watched him work. He used a brown crayon for the thick tree trunk. He used a dark green crayon for the heavy leaves. Then he picked up a black marker and started drawing the figures standing underneath the branches. I walked over and stood right behind his wooden chair. I looked down at the paper. There was no branch drawn for Arthur. There was no branch for Evelyn. There was absolutely no trace of Aunt Chloe anywhere on the page. He drew exactly 2 figures standing on the green grass. One was a tall woman with brown hair wearing a blocky green uniform. She was holding the hand of a smaller boy wearing a blue shirt. Leo dropped the black marker. It rolled off the table and hit the floor. He slapped his small hand flat against the center of the paper covering the drawing. "This is our family, Mom," Leo said. He turned around and looked up at me. His large brown eyes were completely clear, carrying zero doubt. "Just the 2 of us." I looked down at the drawing. I did not try to correct him. I did not try to explain the complicated, ugly biology of the Poole bloodline. He already understood the hardest lesson in the world better than most grown adults. Blood does not make a family. Safety makes a family. I picked up the piece of construction paper. I walked over to the humming refrigerator. I grabbed a cheap plastic magnet and pinned the drawing dead center on the cold metal door. Smack. The military taught me how to take a hit. It taught me how to bite my tongue, follow strict orders, and survive the pain. For 32 years, I actually thought my silence was my armor. I thought taking the abuse without crying meant I was a good soldier. I was dead wrong. Enduring cruelty is not strength. Real strength is staring directly at the people who are actively trying to destroy you, turning your back, and walking away without a single word. Real strength is looking at your own life, drawing a hard line in the dirt, and stating an undeniable fact: I deserve better than this. I grabbed my car keys off the